Look at everyone. Well, welcome everyone to our wonderful day of mystery. Ta ta ta.
Ta-ta-ta!
One of the things that I love about Fictionary is the main kind of bedrock word that is the center of everything that we do. And for those of you that have been here before, please put it into the chat. And if you haven't, this is a great chance for you to play around with the chat. What is that word that we center everything on? It's important to, yes, look at that.
Uh-huh.
Carla's
I
got
think,
it
and you
in
know what?
there
I
first.
think Jordan knows. Look at his picture. He's got a Santa or reindeer on his nose for Christmas. So that to me says kindness right there. I don't know why. It just does.
Kindness is central to Fictionary, and it helps us be the most creative, most amazing writers, editors, people that we can be because you are kind to your readers when you are editing, when you are making these wonderful stories to share, when you're making sure that it's structurally sound. You're kind to yourself even as you're editing because all of these things that you learn and grow make you a more creative and wonderful writer. And then of course, kindness to everyone else. Linda talks about the fact that kindness, showing kindness to others, improves your own mental health, and we've run across that in a lot of the classes that we teach. It's really cool to see the kindness that to whether you're kind to others or kind to yourself, the power that that has. Let's get started. I'm going to talk about the 5 story arc scenes in a mystery novel. Let's start off with kind of first off, Christina. We are very lucky to have Christina here with us. So, Christina is the CEO and founder of Fictionary. I'm a Fictionary certified story coach, editor, and instructor. And we are going to be presenting in the near future, like next year, a book together, which we're really excited about writing and working very hard right now on the research. Coming in 2025, we have 3 books. Christina's involved with all of them. Christina and Lucy Cook have finished Secrets to Writing a Fantasy, and those are coming out in the ARC version very soon, so be watching out for those. Secrets to Writing a Romance, Christina's working on with Linda O'Donnell. But speaking of mysteries, because I have to, we're doing Secrets to Writing a Mystery, and Christina and I are going to hopefully, we're getting that out in 2025, and we are working very hard on getting to the point where we're writing rather than researching, although I have to say the researching is pretty darn fun. So we're kind of caught in the research right now, which is the most fun. And this is part of it. What is a mystery? So our definition is that there is some kind of crime that's committed and it must be solved. And this is really cool because when you're thinking about a mystery, think about this. In a mystery, it's about the puzzle. It's about solving it. It's about getting there. And we're going to talk about a few different things and a little bit of some of the differences. So when we talk genres, mystery is a massive umbrella of genres. It has so many subgenres. It is so well loved and has been read and loved for so many years that there are so many divisions. So we're just going to talk about a few here. And if you have questions, and then be ready because I'm going to ask you a question about mystery writing in just a moment. So there's the mystery, which is that definition that I just talked about. There's some kind of crime or puzzle that needs to be solved. In a cozy, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about cozies this time because cozies are really fun and interesting in that there's still that crime committed and it has to be solved. Usually, the sleuth is some kind of amateur sleuth has been drawn into it because of some connection to the crime or request of somebody, and it's really usually in a very small town or closed environment. But what I love about cozies too is that there's an innocence to them, right? There's an expectation that when you pick up a cozy, that there's not the crimes are often committed off the page. There's not as much violence and usually not as much explicit language and maybe flirtation, but not necessarily quite as deep and dark as some of the other mysteries. So when you pick up a cozy, it's kind of that light read. It's a fun one for around Christmas time for me. If you're going to read murders around Christmas, cozies are fun, right? Then we come into the one that one of the subgenres that have really come into their own right now, psychological thrillers. You'll see a lot of mysteries are labeled psychological thrillers right now. We're having a lot of fun with this because it's the crimes already committed and it's all about the darkness of the mind. You might not even know what the crime is, and you may or may not know who the antagonist is throughout the story. There's so much fun and mystery and suspense that's included in the thriller, in the psychological thriller. But it is a thriller, so there's always this sense of trying to stop something from happening as well. Then we've got, of course, police procedurals. And I feel like these came into their own really through television, even more than actual books, because we got to see so many police procedurals when all of the Law and Order and everything else was coming out, where we were getting to see what was happening with how the crime is solved. And then we've gotten really like police procedurals have gotten really technical, right? And when just going to talk about TV for a second again, with all the CSI and everything that came out, we got really deep into how are all of these cool technologies helping us understand or following the police in solving a crime. Then we, of course, have the ever famous detective. That's the professional searching for clues. And that's got some similarities. Obviously, it's a mystery, but we're following that detective. And I have to say that that was where I first started absolutely loving following detectives was with P.D. James and Ellis Peters. And I mean, sometimes absolutely your Eclipse has just said, has are Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple considered cozy since they're amateur? And oh my goodness, Eclipse, we were just talking about that literally before we started here. And I would say Miss Marple absolutely would be considered a cozy. And I was just talking about whether we would call Hercule Poirot a cozy or not. Whether we label him a cozy or not, I think one of the things that we love about Agatha Christie is her ability to really take us along in that solving of the mystery. And I really do think that we could consider Hercule Poirot an amateur sleuth as well, even though it is like he has very special skills that help him become a good. And that's the thing about the detectives is that the detective doesn't have to be a police officer or a private investigator necessarily, but they do have some special skills that make them particularly good at solving crimes. We'll find now that sometimes those detectives blur into being perhaps a medical professional who has those skills that are specific to solving the puzzle, the crime, the thing that's missing there. And Carolyn's asked this really interesting. So she's doing a literary story, so a literary novel with an arson and a married amateur victim solving a whodunit. So look at that. So a whodunit, that's really the mystery, right? That's the who committed the crime. That's the thing that makes it a mystery is that we want to know who solved it. Uh, want to solve it by the end. So that's that mystery element in there with an arson. Remember, it's a crime. It doesn't have to be a murder. So that fits in perfectly with the mystery. And I love this connection with it. It looks like there's going to be the victims and the detective are connected in some way, if that's what the married section means. So you've got that connection to the detective or to the person trying to figure it out, which is one of the things that often we see in cozies, right? Where they're drawn in because of the connection to the crime in some way, trying to save somebody that matters to them. They may have been accused of the crime. It's often the way that they get pulled into the murder investigate or into the crime investigation. Okay, we've got a lot of things, but I'm going to go right into that question about the difference between a mystery and a thriller and trying to figure out that. I'm going to give you a really kind of broad statement and see if this works. And we're going to be playing with a lot in the book and in our research. So with a mystery, here, the mystery, think about it as a puzzle, right? The puzzle is the thing that starts the mystery story, and then the climax, the ending is the figuring it out, right? It's finding out who is the culprit, recognizing, and usually sometimes even why they did it. With a thriller, this is you're trying to stop a future event almost rather than having something. So here the antagonist is often known by the protagonist that there's something or someone or a group that you're trying to stop them from doing something horrible. And that's what makes it a thriller, is that in the climax, the question isn't who did it. The question is, did the horrible thing get stopped? Like, were we able to stop them? So that's kind of a broad way of thinking about it. So hopefully that helps when you're trying to figure out what you're doing. So you will know if your protagonist knows who it is and they're trying to stop someone. If the crime is committed but they don't know who did it, you're probably looking at a mystery. Okay, let's go on to speaking of protagonists, and I hope, anyway, we're just going to keep going. Here we go. So you need to think about the choices for your story for protagonists. And a protagonist can be single, a single protagonist. You think about a protagonist as an entity. You can have a combined protagonist. This is two people who are have the same story goal and the same story stakes. So they're on the same adventure, but they're very different people, and that's what gives us that very interesting conflict can even happen between those two people, but they're heading for the same thing. And then a group protagonist. You can always have a group protagonist where it's a larger group that's having that. And so each individual within that entity will have their own stakes and goals, but the overall, all of that will impact how the final thing is done. The next thing to talk about is point of view. And this has become something that is just so intriguing. It's something that we're really playing with for the book, is where are the points of view in a mystery, in a in a psychological thriller? How are these POVs being used? And the power of the single POV, where we're keeping it within, say, the detective's viewpoint, and you're really following them along with each of the clues and things as they find, and the multiple point of view. And when that gives the reader more information, perhaps, than the detective has, but also sometimes gives them it may create a red herring that the detective doesn't have because you have more information than the detective has. So it's a red herring for the reader, but not for the detective. So how's that for like mysteries are so cool and so much fun to do. So as we're keeping going, I'm going to keep talking because I know you came for the 5 scenes. And I just wanted to say that those are things that are really getting us focused. And the next thing that really helps is this skeleton blurb. So with a skeleton blurb, the protagonist, whether the protagonist entity, single, combined, or group, must, and then there's a story goal, something that is usually obviously in a mystery, we're talking about mystery here, is to solve the mystery, solve the puzzle, solve the crime, whatever that is, that's the story goal. Find out who did it. Then, otherwise, you have the story stakes. And the greatest thing about mysteries and is that the story stakes are always so high, right? More crimes will be committed, people will die. There's always these high stakes that are there. And we have all these things. That's the skeleton blurb is for the external plot, and it helps keep your story focused and your pacing strong. And this is where we can jump into now the 5 story arc scenes and really look at them for a mystery and see how it connects. So most of you are familiar with this. This is the generic story arc. It starts with that inciting incident that shakes up the ordinary world. We have the acceptance of the story goal in plot point 1, that middle plot point where they turn to be proactive from reactive, and I'm going to talk about that with cozies in particular. Then you have that plot point 2, the deep, dark, horrible moment, but also a moment where you find out something important. And then finally the climax where where the story goal is addressed. It may or may not be discovered or answered in a positive, but it's definitely answered. So let's talk mysteries. Let's get into this, guys. Here we go. Crime committed. And the inciting incident, the crime is committed in a cozy. This can be, you have to have introduced the sleuth, but the inciting incident often happens off the scene. So the crime is committed, but the body may not be shown. Sometimes too in cozies, and this is a lot of fun with mysteries, is it shows the inciting incident is the shake-up moment where we get to see the victim and the possible suspects all together, so that the reader gets that introduction into the world and the possibilities of people getting hurt. And then, of course, that wonderful moment where there's no, there's something happens. Accepting the story goal. With a cozy, this is the goal to solve the mystery in a mystery overall, but in a cozy, this is that moment, and you can think of it right now with any cozy that you're thinking of yourself. It's the point where the poor, the little amateur sleuth has been drawn into this and accepts they need to figure out who really killed this person or who really committed this crime. It's very, very important to them. It might be that, their best friend is begging them to prove that they're innocent. It might be that they're accused. There's so many different ways they can be drawn in, but you get that idea of how they're drawn into the story. So that's plot point one. Then in a mystery, we have this amazing middle. And the middle is so cool because up until the middle in most mysteries, it's almost like the antagonist has been dropping things in the way, right? The antagonist has been causing the problems. The sleuth is just trying their best to deal with all of these different things, and they're finding out more information and more information. There are so many suspects. Everything's coming together. They get to this point at the middle plot point. Remember, this is where they become proactive, right? It's the moment of shift between taking what's coming at you and then deciding to go ahead and start maybe laying the traps, maybe deciding cutting down who the people are and figuring out whether they're actually the people that are committed the crime or not. This is the middle plot point is so cool in a mystery because you can really feel it, right? It's the moment where the detective, the sleuth, takes over and says, okay, this is it. I have to figure this out. The other really cool thing about a mystery is that, let's talk murder mystery here for a second. Often there's a new body like dropped in the middle of the middle plot point. And that new body is often one of the suspects. So it turns the middle plot point turns this whole thing on its head. It causes the sleuth to have to rethink what they've done before, where they've come from. And it really is so key. So we get that point, and then we know where we're going, right? I've already said this. Plot point two, we're getting to plot point two. Plot point two changes the story direction, but plot point two is that moment where the 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 investigation has taken it to this moment where the sleuth has caused something horrible to happen, or something horrible has happened and they've lost everything. They're at their darkest point. They really don't think they can make it on any further. But at the same time, at this same moment, in this scene, there's also that moment of finding out that final piece of information, that final clue that's going to hold everything together, that's going to help them get to the final point. Then we have, of course, solving the mystery. That's what has to happen in the climax. It can be so exciting. It can be the detective gets to find out everything, and it may be this in the climax or after, but we usually not only find out who did the crime, but then also why they did it, and that can come sometimes in the resolution, but that's really cool as well. Okay, I know I'm going over my time, so I'm going to just talk quickly. So we've talked about the books at the beginning, and I want to give you time to stick around and ask some questions. We have lots of courses coming up, and of course, we really, really want you to take part in as much of this as you can.